Hello and welcome to Prime Code Media. In this video, I'll be discussing the Bootstrap cards. Let's see what the documentation says about Bootstrap cards. Here, the documentation says Bootstrap cards provide a flexible and extensible content container with multiple variants and options. The documentation also provides us with an example of a card. As you can see, a card can have an image, can have a title, some text as part of the content, as well as a link. And down here, it further goes on and provides us with an example code. So this is the example of the code that you can use in order to create a card. So if you want to create a card, you can simply copy and paste this code. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for this discussion, I'm going to write the code, and to do that, I'm going to use my code editor, Atom. So I'm going to first of all add a div, and now this div is going to have a class. I'm going to give this div a class of card. So this is the class of this div. Next, inside this div, I'm going to add an image. So here's an image element, and then the source of my images. For this source, I am going to use a website called pixam.photos. So this a URL, I'm going to copy it and paste it inside here as my source, and then you'll see that every time I refresh my photos, you will get a new random image, and then the alternate text will be image. So next I am going to add but before I go ahead, I need to add a class here, and the class will be that of card image top. Okay, I'm done with the image. Next, I'm going to add another div. Now this div is also going to have a class of its own, and the class here will be that of card body, like so. So let me also create some space here. Now inside this card body, I am going to add a title, and to add a title, I'm going to use an H5 element. So you are free to use a level heading of your choice. You can use an H4, H6. So I'm just going to use an H5 because this is the level heading that they have used in that example that we were just looking at. And now this level 5 heading is going to have a class, and the class of this level 5 heading will be that of card title. Okay, card title. Let me also write down here title, and then I am also going to add a text. So I'm going to use a paragraph element. Now this paragraph element is also going to have a class. I'm going to add a class here, and the class will be that of card text, like so. So I'm also going to, so the card text in here, I'm going to paste the lorem ipsum text. I'm going to paste some lorem ipsum text like so, and then I'm done with the card text. Now next, I'm going to add a link, and to add a link, I'm going to use an anchor tag, and this anchor element is going to have an href of an empty string, and a class. Let me add a class here of btn for button, and then a btn primary. Btn primary specifies the type of button that I am adding here. And as you'll remember, we discussed these in detail in the episode on buttons. And right here, I'm just going to click the text or button text. This is the text that will be on our button. Click here. Now, I think I've added just about everything that we need in order to create a button. Let's save our work and go back to the browser. You can see this button is taking the entire width and height of our viewport. Why is that? The answer is inside the documentation. If you go and click sizing, you will see that the documentation, it says here, cards assume no specific width to start, so they will be 100% wide unless otherwise stated. So what this means is that we will have to specify the size of our card. So again, if we go back to the documentation and go back to the example of a card that we were looking at earlier when we started off, you will see that this card has a size. So the size is specified here. The size is that is the width is 18 rem. So I am also going to give my size an 18 rem width. So I am going to do that in here. The first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to add a style attribute and then specify the width. So this is the CSS property, a colon, and then 18 rem. This is the size. So REM or REM stands for root M. I discuss this unit and others in more detail in the CSS for beginners series. Now let's go back to the browser and see if there's a change to the appearance of our card. Let me refresh and see. Now there we go. We now have our card no longer taking up 100% width of our viewport. Now the card is clearly visible right now. So inside the card body, you can add a wide variety of content, including images. As you can see this image, you can also add the title, text, links, and more. Now, I want us to take a closer look at this code. Now, here first I added a div and gave this div a class of card. Next, I added an image. And the source, I took this source, used the lorem pixum URL, and then I gave this image element a class of card image top. Now this class, what this class does is that it places the image at the top of the card. Next, I created this or added this div and gave this div a class of card body. Now this is the building block of a card. Next, I added a title using a level 5 heading. As I was saying earlier, you have a choice in terms of the size of the heading. You can use an H6, H4, H5. There is the option here. The choice here is yours. Next, I added the text, the card text using the p tag, and I gave this a class of card text here. Lastly, I added a link using an anchor tag. It has an href at the moment of an empty string and a class of btn for a button and btn for btn primary to specify the type of button that I wanted to add to my card. Now I am going to copy this card and paste it 3 times so that we have 4 of them. So I'm just going to copy this card like so, and I am going to paste it. So we have 2, we have 3, now we have 4. Now let me save and let's go to our browser and see if we have successfully to create 4 copies of our cards. Now we have 4 cards. Now as you can see, these cards are by default stacked on top of each other. So if we want to make them sit horizontally next to each other, we will have to use the grid system, which we have already covered on this series. Now let's go to the documentation and see what the documentation says about this. If you go and click using grid markup, you'll see here the documentation says using the grid wrap cards in columns and rows as needed. So this is what we will have to do in order to have our cards sitting next to each other like they do here on this example. And all we need to do, we will have to wrap all our cards first inside a row, and then each and every one of the card will be now a column, so they will form columns. So let's go and do that inside this code editor. The first thing that I am going to do right here is to create or add rather a div. So I am going to add a div here. I think I made a mistake here. Let me just go back here. So I'm going to add a div like so. So this is the div. I am going to give this div a class. It's going to have a class of row, and then let me create some space here. So I am going to copy all these cards. So let me copy all the cards, all of them. I'm actually going to cut them. All right, I've just cut all the cards, and then I am going to paste them inside this div right here. Now these cards are now inside a div that I gave the class of row. So now next, each div is now I'm going to put each and every one of these cards inside a div that has a class. I'm going to put each and every one of these cards inside a div that has a class. Let me give this div a class. This div is going to have a class of column. Okay, like so. So here I want this div on a large viewport. I want my cards to take up 3 units, and I want my cards on a medium viewport to take up I'll say let them take up 4 units, and then on a small viewport, let me see, on a small viewport they can take just 6 units. So we discussed this in detail, if you remember, in the episode on the grid system. Please feel free to check that episode if you are joining us midway. So next, I am going to put each and every one of these elements or inside each and every one of these cards, starting with this card. So I'm going to cut this card here and paste it inside here. Now next, as you can see, these other cards are not inside the element that is a div that has a class of column. So I am going to delete all these cards starting with this one, and then I am going to copy this card here, and then I am going to paste it 3 times so that once again we have 4 copies like so. So let me just make sure that everything is just well indented. Okay, so let me save my work and go back to my browser and refresh to see if we've managed to achieve what we set ourselves out to. Now, as you can see, we now have all our cards now sitting horizontally next to each other. And if I may just come here and squeeze the screen, you'll see that they are now responsive. Let's see on a medium sized screen. As you can see on a medium sized screen, now we have them sitting next to each other, three of them sitting next to each other, and two sitting next to each other on a smaller screen like that. And so this is what we wanted to achieve. We wanted these cards to sit next to each other horizontally and to also be flexible, that is for them to be able to be responsive to different screen or viewport sizes. So what we can also do to these cards is that we can also give them a background color. Let's go and consult the documentation to find out how we can go about doing that. Inside the documentation, if you can just go and click on background, let's see, where is background and color? Here is background and color. You'll see that here is an example of a code. So it's the documentation says here, set a background color with constructing foreground color. And now here we are being provided the example of the class that we can also add in order to get one of these different types of predefined background colors. So I am going to go back, go inside my code editor. The first thing that I am going to do, I'm just going to give a background color to the first card. I am going to do that by adding a class, and the class is that of text bg for background, and then primary is the type of a background color that I am adding, and that is the blue background color. So let me save my work, and then I am going to refresh my cards so that we see if we have successfully managed to change the background color of my card. So as you can see, I have managed to change the background color of this card, and I have successfully managed to do that by adding a class to this card. So I have only changed the background color of this card. As you can see, the other cards still have their default white background color. So if I want to change the background color of all these cards, I can do that by targeting these cards inside the style sheet. So I am going to delete this class here and target all the cards inside my style sheet here. So I am going to use the class name. So first, the class name is preceded by a period character or dot, and then I'm going to use the class name card. This targets all the cards, and then I'm here going to specify the CSS property. What I want to change is the background color. So to change this background color here, I'm just going to use if, for example, you are not happy or you think maybe you don't like any of these colors that are predefined by Bootstrap, you have the option to pick your own palettes or use any source of palettes in order to give your content a background color. And that's the great thing about Bootstrap, is that it is not restricting you to its predefined elements. So I'm going to use color palette for my preferred background color. So I'm going to use color hunt. Let me see if I have a background color that I can use. So let's see, there are many background colors. Sometimes it's even hard to pick up which one you can use. So let me just pick this one up. I think this will be fine. So this is the background color. I'm going to go back into my style sheet and uh, paste this one. It's important that this hex code is preceded by a hashtag sign for it to work, and I'm going to close this off with a semicolon. Now let me save my work inside my style sheet and then go back to my index.html file and save as well. Now let's go back to the browser and refresh to see if the uh, changes are rendered correctly. So everything is rendered correctly. As you can see, now our background color has changed. We have managed to use the background color that we picked up from colorhunt.com, and our cards have a new background color, and we did this by targeting all our cards from our styles.css file. So what we can also do to our cards is that we can also give our cards the headers and footers. And but before we go on and give our cards headers and footers, let's just see what the documentation says we can go about doing that. Inside the documentation, if you click on header and footer here, let's see the example that is being provided by the documentation. Now, as you can see, here is that example. We'll have to add a div and give it a class of header, and that will be inside the card itself. So inside the card here, the first thing that I am going to do, I'm just going to give a header to the first card, okay, like so. I'm going to give this card a header. First, I'm adding a div, and then inside this div, I'm going to give this div a class. This div is going to have a class, and the class of this div will be that of a card header. Okay, the class is that of a card header. All right, like so. All right, let me just write here card header, like so. And then I'm also going to I'm just going to copy this line of code here, like so. And then I am going to paste it right here at the bottom, like so. And then this will be, I'm just going to change the class here from card header to card footer, and then I'm also going to change the text here to footer as well. So now let's save our work and go back to the browser and refresh to see if we have successfully managed to add footers and headers. What the documentation also tells us is that we can also style our headers. Let's see what the documentation says. The documentation here says card headers can be styled by adding card header to a level heading. So here they are not specific in terms of the level heading. This is because it is once again your choice in terms of what level heading that you want to use. So inside the documentation, or inside the our code editor, I beg your pardon, I am going to style my headers. So inside here, I'm going to change this div to a level 4 heading. Let me just change this to a level 4 heading. So this is no longer a div. Level 4 heading. And then to ensure that there is a consistency, what I am going to do, I am going to delete all these other cards, and then copy this card and paste it 3 times so that we once again have 4 copies like we did. So we once again now have 4 copies. Let me just make sure that everything is well indented here, like so. Now let me save my work, and let's go back to the browser and refresh to see if we've managed to style our headers. Now, as you can see, the headers are a bit larger than they were before, and this is because we styled them as per the documentation. Here, as it said, the card headers can be styled by adding the card header class to a level heading element. So this is what we did, and this is why the card headers are a bit larger. Now, one other thing that we can also do that to the footer. So I'm also going to do the same to the footer. I'm also going to change this. Let me just move this up a bit. I'm also going to do the same to the footer. I'm going to change this to an H4 as well. All right, let me also change this one to an H4 as well. I am now once again going to delete all the 4 paragraphs or 4 cards, I beg your pardon. And then I am going to copy this card and paste it 3 times so that we once again have 4 copies, like so. So now once again we have 4 copies of this card. I'm going to save my work and then go back to the browser and then refresh. Now, as you can see, I have now also managed to style the footer by adding the class to a level heading, and this time I've also added this one to a level 4 heading. What I can also do here is that I can also make the text. So if we scroll a bit here, the class that we can use, I just want to show you the class that we can use. We can also mute the text. So we can also mute the text. So I'm going to mute the footer. I'm going to do that. Let me do this to the first card. So what I am going to do, I'm just going to add a class. The class is that of text muted, like so. Let's just double check if this is what we did. Okay, correct, we've done the right thing. And then once again I'm going to save my work, and then I am going to delete all the other 3 cards so that I'm only left with 1 card that I will delete, that I will copy and paste, so that we again have 4, like so. So I am going to copy this card here and paste it 3 times so that we have 4 of these cards. So let me just save my work here, and then let's go back to the browser and see if the changes are rendered correctly. Now, as you can see, the footer is now muted. So earlier, as you could see, everything, the footer looked exactly the same as the header. So the header is clearly visible, but the card footer is now muted, and we've managed to make it look muted by adding a class to this footer, and this is the class that we have added. Next, let's give our cards a border, but first let's find out what the documentation says. So inside the documentation, if you come here and click on a border, here is what the documentation says. It says use border utilities to change just the border color of a card. So this is what we want to do, and in order to do that, here is an example of a code right here. So the only thing that we are going to do, we are just going to add this class to a one of our cards. So we are going to add a class of card, and then I will also specify the type of border that we want to add. So let's go back to our cards and do just that. Once again, I'm going to do this to my first card. So I'm going to add a class, and then let me just double check one last time. Border. All right. So the class is that of border. I'm going to use border dark instead of border primary. So, and then once again, like I have just been doing, I'm going to delete the three cards. I'm going to delete these three cards, and then copy this one which has a border like so, and then I am going to paste it 3 times so that once again we have 4 copies. Now we are back at 4 copies of our cards, and then I'm going to save my work. And then now let's go back to the browser. At the moment, you can see that we don't have a dark border around our cards. Now let's refresh. Now there we go. Our cards now have a dark border, and we have managed to do this by adding this class of card border to all our cards, and by so doing we've managed to add borders around each and every one of our cards. Now the cards get their height from their content. You'll see, for example, if I were just to come inside here and let me just delete some amount of the text inside here. I want to delete the same amount of text inside the cards. Okay, I'm just going to delete up to this last comma here, like so. So like so, let me just turn this into a capital letter S. Okay, and then I am going to skip one card and then do the same to this one, like so. So I'm also going to delete here. Okay, made a mistake there. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to remove this and put a capital letter S, like so. So let me save this work, go back to the browser and refresh. As you can see, our cards are no longer equal in terms of their height. So they are no longer equal, but we can still make them have equal height even though they do not have the same amount of content. So the reason why they are not equal in terms of the size, this is because of the amount of content inside them. So the amount of content, as I was saying earlier, determines the height of these cards. So how do we make them equal despite not having the same amount of content? We can do that by adding a class of age 100 to each card. So let's do that and see if that works. So inside each and every one of these cards, I'm going to add a class. So let me start with the first card here. So the first card here, I'm going to have add a class of age 100. It's a small letter age 100, and then let me move on to the next card. age 100. That's the second card. And then the third card, age 100. And then the fourth and last card, we are going to add as well a class of age 100. Now let me save, and let's go back to the browser and see if, despite not having equal amount of content, our cards will be equal after refreshing. Let's refresh. Now there we go. The height of our cards is equal, and this is despite our cards not having the same amount of content. So for this discussion, we'll just end the things here. But there is a lot that you can do with cards. For example, what you can also be able to do with cards is that you can have, for example, lists as content inside your cards. So there is a lot that you can do with cards, and a lot of information regarding this is inside the documentation. As you can see, you can also have an ordered list as content inside your cards. So a lot of information inside your documentation. Please play around with the code and explore, try different combinations of text inside the cards, and that will assist a great deal in terms of understanding the Bootstrap cards. Thank you so much for watching, folks. If you found this video helpful, please click subscribe and the bell icon for notifications. Till we code again next time. Take care.